Welcome, I'm Dave,
I'm John.
and this is Teaching Like Ted Lasso.
The product you'd most like to get into business with is joy.
Sí, mucho joy.
I don't know if I can get you paid for that, though, Danny.
I like to give away joy for free.
Oh.
Thanks for the inspiration, Danny. On this season of Teaching Like Ted Lasso, we'll be giving away joy for free.
I think if you ask people in the mathematical community, like who's the one person that you might identify with joy, it would be our guest today. So exceedingly happy to have him here. Francis, would you introduce yourself to our audience?
Sure, yeah. I'm Francis Su. I am a mathematics professor at Harvey Mudd College in Southern California, which is a small science and engineering school, and have been teaching here for a number of years now and having fun doing it.
What is your work like at Harvey Mudd?
It's a mixture of teaching and research and other kinds of activities that go on the college campus, and it's a lot of fun. The work that I do research-wise is an area of math known as topological combinatorics, which is a study of, you can think of combinatorics as a study of clever ways of counting things. And topology is a study of, one way to think about it, a study of shapes and surfaces. And the work that I do tries to connect those things to problems in the social sciences. And then, of course, I teach a lot of courses that it's all undergraduates here, students doing science and engineering and math, and I try to get them excited about the math.
A lot of people might know you for is mathematics for human flourishing. Could you tell us a little bit of the kind of the origin story of that?
Yeah, so that's this is a book that I wrote. It came out in 2020. Sometimes I describe the book as a set of meditations about what it means to be human, using math as a lens. And so I wanted it to write it to be accessible to a broad public audience. But I also had in mind teachers of mathematics, students of math, people who don't like math, and people who are part of the mathematical community doing research in math as well. And so it was a project that was born out of, I guess one way to say it is it's born out of this talk that I gave when I was president of the Mathematical Association of America, making that same case, and that was in 2017. The origin of that is that for a very long time, I mean, since I started doing math in grad school, I had to wrestle with this question, like, what is math? Why should anybody be doing math? And in my case, when I was an undergrad at the University of Texas, I started wrestling with this a little bit because both my parents were had major serious illnesses, and I was wrestling with big life questions like, what is the whole point of anything that I do? And then I get to grad school and I had a really tough time. My mother died that first year. I experienced setbacks. I failed my first qualifying exam. I suddenly felt like an imposter that like, hey, everybody around here is smarter than me. And so this idea, like my dream from being a kid was like, oh, I'm going to get a PhD in math. And part of the joy of doing math started getting mixed up with this identity, this need to be seen as smart. And so then I
Mm.
went to grad school at Harvard and suddenly like everybody's smart and they're smarter than me in some way. Like the way I measured it then was like, whoa, like they're able to do all these things and think very quickly and I felt like I couldn't do any of that. So I was really wrestling with why am I in this graduate program? And maybe I should quit. Like maybe I should do something more meaningful in life, whatever that meant. And so there was this deep soul searching that started me on that journey of asking the big question, why am I doing this? Like is it really just for prestige or is there something more? And how do I disentangle those things, right? Like how do I begin to think of math as something that it's not just for the elite few, but it's for everybody? Many of the ideas I wrestle in the book have been a long-running theme in my own life and in my own professional journey.
It's an amazing story of perseverance. Thank you so much for sharing that.
very common in everyone's mathematical journey to feel like you're stuck, or maybe there's something you have trouble getting understanding or getting past, or maybe even somebody's counted you out, somebody's said you don't belong, and unfortunately, that's those experiences are common. And the first experience is, this experience born of struggle is part of what it means to do math, and we shouldn't be afraid of it. Certainly, if external people are saying you shouldn't do math, that's a bad thing. But the struggle, actually, as I argue in the book, is actually a good thing, and it's part of what shapes us and makes us receptacles for joy, I guess, as we'll get into the topic of joy.
You mentioned joy, Francis. What's been giving you joy recently?
Well, I have a 6-year-old son who is providing, I think, for me a new window on joy because I enjoy watching him experience things for the first time, and that's amazing. It's pretty wonderful. Like every morning he wakes up, stuff is going on in his brain, and he just wakes up and he asks a question, like like random question. Like, let me see if I can even remember what he asked the other day. He woke up asking, "Are me and I the same thing?" I guess he was he was pondering the use of these words and
Mhm.
when you use one and when you use the other. And anyways, it's just, things we take for granted, you don't really notice until you look at them through the eyes of a kid.
What you say makes me wonder why classrooms aren't more of a place of joy, which we'll get to later, because they have all of these kids in there going through that exact same thing.
Yeah, and my son's now going into first grade, so I'm about to experience the experience what lots of other kids experience, and I hope it's not a bad one.
John, what about you? What are you doing lately that's bringing you joy?
Actually, I'll be super specific. This week I had one of those teacher joy moments of trying a new lesson, like thinking, no, we should have a lesson that does something like this. We're doing something like Dan Meyer's graphing stories.
Hmm.
But I wanted to do something that the students had more of an experience instead of watching a video and trying to graph a quantity that was in the video. Have a terrific teaching assistant, Lindsay, that could brainstorm with, and they thought of having some of the students perform a story for the other students to try to graph. And so that turned into a new lesson, and the students just knocked it out of the park. They really got into it. And when you get that whole community collaborating, you get things that you as an individual would never have thought of. Everybody was there and everybody was engaged. And I just left the classroom like a mile high from that experience. And I had no idea how it was going to go coming in. So it was very satisfying.
There's two that come to mind immediately. One is doing jigsaw puzzles. And so the latest one we had is a monster. It's 1,500 pieces. And so it's really taken some back to Francis, your point of just perseverance, right? There's certainly some struggle going through doing that, but we do a little bit every day, and that's been bringing me joy, especially when you find that piece that fits. And then the other is that for the last 3 years, we've had a nesting pair of green herons just in the ewes outside of our house. It's always great to watch their chicks kind of start. First, they're just hanging out in the ewes, and then they venture out, hopping into some closer trees that we can see. And then finally, we're watching them fly, and watching that sort of progress brings me joy as well.
You've got to put one of those pictures into the video here.
Okay, I
Okay.
will. The very first year, they haven't done this again, but the very first year they ended up on the wire. So there was a wire that kind of went through the U's, and they could get about just anywhere they wanted. And it actually, they started, I think, flying later because they could get everywhere. And I kind of think like they were new parents, they didn't know what to do. And now that probably the green herons dissuade them from getting on the wire so that they can start flying. At least that's what I'm making up in my story that's giving me joy. So
Francis, in your work, you touch on joy and you're thinking about kind of the different dimensions of joy. So you're a terrific person to ask kind of at the beginning of our season on joy. Like how do you define joy?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I guess I think of joy as something that is a deep state of being that is it's different than happiness in the sense that happiness can be fleeting. It kind of comes and goes, whereas joy is more of a way of being. It's something that not only you experience, but you can also practice. You can also become more attuned to. It's not really an emotion in the sense that emotions come and go. It's more of a way. That's sorry, it's a hard thing to define. It's more of a
Yeah,
way of being, and I like to think of it that way because I can be joyful even in a difficult time. I can take joy in certain things, even the way we describe it. Just like even that sentence, to take joy says that this is something that you can grasp onto and it's not just something that you allow to come and go. Take joy in my relationship with my son, even if we're going through a difficult time as a family. Take joy in doing a simple mathematical puzzle or putting a 1,000-piece puzzle together, even though I'm experiencing sorrow at the time. Right? There's a way that you can hold on to joy that is profound.
I love the distinction from happiness. My spouse will sometimes say, people can take happiness from you, and no one can take joy from you.
Yeah, I like that. Sort of get that same idea of it being a deep state of being, of contentment, of contentment. I actually don't like, not sure if that's exactly it either, because there's so many things in life that buffet us that are going to take us out of contentment, but you can still experience an inner sense of joy.
In the book, you connect to that idea of joyful gratitude.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. Gratitude and wonder that you saw something amazing, something
Mhm.
beautiful. And maybe in that way, it's also something you experience when you see a moving piece of art. And maybe the art is expressing something deep and sorrowful, but like your being and presence with that piece of art takes you to a place of meditative reflection.
You have your students do some artwork, if I recall from your keynote at Michigan A&T.
Yeah, in one of my classes, which is a class on math education and math philosophy and math history, I asked my students as a final project to express something, a reaction to some of the readings we've been doing through a visual medium. Often it's a form of art, a hand-drawn art, but it could be some other way of expressing themselves. And the whole idea there was I wanted to try to make my classroom feel human. And the usual way we do that, the usual kind of assigned final project is to write a paper. And I actually did have a writing project as well, but this class actually had three final projects, which were staggered, so they weren't all due at the same time. But one was a written project, one was a exploratory project, and one was a visual project. And the written project was a paper, which is maybe the more common kind of assessment that you do. But the visual project, I think, was quite different. The exploratory project was asking them to explore a piece of mathematics. Yeah. So, anyways, and the visual project, I was very clear to say you don't need to have a beautiful piece of art, right? Like you're not going to be judged on the quality of the art, only on the quality of the idea. And yet, the amazing thing is, they still end up producing these amazing pieces of art. There's an aspect of which students want to be their whole selves in our classrooms and want to show what they can do in creative ways, even if they know they're not going to be assessed on it. Because that to me is a striking thing. I showed one picture at this talk that David saw, but I have several others that are just as beautiful and moving from my students, which is really amazing.
My son is an art teacher, and we commiserate frequently over how, in both math and art, some students feel like they've been excluded from that. But
Uh,
how much we both deeply believe that everybody can do art, everybody can do math.
Yes, yes, that's a great example because in the best environments, students feel like doing art, and we should cultivate that. We don't make them feel bad if they're not performing in some way.
Now, you wrote an article, A Meditation on Mathematical Joy, and in there you actually talk about a joy book.
Yeah, so just for your listeners, this was just an article on a fictitious book. If I had to write a book,
So far fictitious.
it's not so far because, but I was reacting to the fact that my kid, he was 5 years old at the time we read this book, Quiet Book. It's a delightful book. I recommend to any parent about the many different kinds of quiet that you can have. There's the hush quiet when you have to be silent for some reason. But there's also the kind of quiet that you experience where you are bored, or a quiet where you are concentrating, or a quiet where you're reflecting. And the book does a really great job at drawing out the different kinds of quiet that exist. But anyways, I was thinking like, gosh, what would a joy book look like? And of course, being a mathematician, I gravitated towards thinking about what mathematical joy looks like. I was thinking about like the idea of, I think I called it toddler in a swing joy, and likened that to the joy that you might feel when playing a game. And like with my son, I play this game called the opposites game. Well, what's the game? The game is give me the opposite of a word, right? And so, the obvious ones are hot, cold, left, right, but we like to take it in directions where it doesn't have an obvious opposite. What's the opposite of dog? Okay, well then maybe there's a cat. What's the opposite of Kleenex? Well, that's a little harder, right? But the fun thing is to watch what he comes up with. Or he'll give me one that's completely hard to think about, and I have to come up with something. And then we laugh at the end, right? That's a very simple kind of joy. And yet even that little simple game points to sort of a deeper mathematical idea, the idea of opposites, the idea of symmetry or maybe anti-symmetry, the idea of negative numbers. He already now has a concept of negative numbers because that was an opening for me to talk about like what's the opposite of two? Well, there's this thing called -2. Oh, wow. Like, what is that? And so anyway, so joy. Yeah, there's lots of different ways that you might experience mathematical joy, right? There's the joy that you mentioned about a puzzle, like solving a puzzle, and you persist and you sit for a long time, and then you finally find that puzzle piece that fits, and boom, it's like, whoa, yeah, that's cool, right? Like there's this piece that you never thought of to place where it should go, and once it goes in, you're like, ah, I see why it fits there. Maybe it didn't look like it fit there before. That kind of joy is a different kind of joy than, the toddler and the swing joy, right? This one is a joy that comes about after a long struggle. And when you finally figure something out, it's like, aha, right? There's that moment of feeling like you finally see the deeper meaning or whatever it is. In this case, it's the deeper reason why this puzzle piece fits. But in math, it's often like, oh, I see how this idea is connected to that other idea. And it all makes sense. And so there's this deep satisfaction, which is deeper than the temporary happiness that you might feel. But it's deeper because you're like, I understand. Like this helps me see the whole these other things, these other patterns in the same way. Yeah, anyway, so yeah, there's many different kinds of joy I think you could deal with in your season here on the podcast. But that's one, right? The joy after a long struggle when you finally understand something.
The article is just fabulous, and I'm sure that Dave is going to link it in the show notes. And you make reference to C.S. Lewis and Pascal, but you've got this quote from Thomas Aquinas: "More delightful still does this knowledge of truth become to one who has the habit of wisdom and knowledge, the result of which is that he contemplates without difficulty." And
Yes.
and you share how that for you this implies that joy becomes more available the more we practice it.
Yeah, no, I mean, I guess this is related to what I was saying earlier that you can practice joy by engaging in joyful activities, starting to notice and wonder. I guess in this community, we like to talk about noticing and wondering in mathematics. And the more you practice that discipline, the more you're inclined to notice and wonder. And similarly, the more you engage in joyful experiences, the more you readily see it when it's there. Now, here's an example. In college, I had this class that this course requirement that I had to take. It was an art requirement or something like that. And maybe back then I was not so appreciative of having these requirements, these breadth requirements. But one of the things I could do to satisfy that was take an architecture class. And I just did it because I thought, oh, okay, this will be interesting. It'll fulfill my requirement. But it turns out to be like one of the most enjoyable classes that I took because I was taught, we practiced in that class meditating on buildings and looking at their form and their function and how they fit together, how architects think about form and function and these things fitting together. And so we looked at lots of buildings. And so the amazing thing is like after that semester, I now every building I see, I look in a new, a fresh way, a different way. And it brings me a kind of joy to be able to recognize certain patterns and trends. I could tell you something about the era in which it was built just by looking at it, that kind of thing. It's like, whoa, this is opening up a new way of seeing the world. And because I practiced it, it now becomes second nature. And I think that that's a kind of attitude that we, as teachers, should always continue to cultivate in ourselves, as well as our students.
So John brought up C.S. Lewis as well. I'm going to go back though first to you were on a podcast, How to Be Human. And on that, you talked about this idea of joy being related to being surprised. I can't remember who that podcaster is, but he's a comedian, I believe, and you
Oh,
guys are
yes.
talking about jokes. The host is Chris Duffy.
Yes,
And
yes. Thank you for reminding me.
and joy comes from surprises, whether they're story, which again is one of the reasons I think John and I like Ted Lasso, is it's not a the usual story. You expect
Yes.
these two people to get together, for instance, and they don't. And so I feel like the show gives me joy because of that surprise. But what I found interesting is I listened to that, like I said, I get joy out of the research. I listened to that episode and then I read the article, and one of Lewis's books is called Surprised by Joy.
I like what Lewis has to say about joy in many ways, and there's this idea that he gets at, which is that joy often comes with a longing, and in some ways, it's an inconsolable longing that keeps you wanting more. And people have that experience in mathematics as well, often, where they're like, hey, they saw something that's kind of cool. Like they got a glimpse of a certain kind of beauty and they want more of it. I was thinking, trying to think about it as before we got on this podcast of like experiences of joy that I had as a kid. One was, I think, I grew up reading lots of books by Martin Gardner,
Mm.
who is a well-known writer who wrote yes, right, Scientific American, right? He wrote a column for Scientific American for many, many years that I grew up reading books of essays collected from those. But I learned from, I think, reading one of those books how to make something called a hexaflexagon.
Mm.
So a hexaflexagon is this funny little shape thing you can make out of paper folding. I think the story goes that the inventor was British and came to study in America, and the paper sizes are different, and so he had to shave a long strip of paper off his British paper to make it fit the American the American notebook. And so he was playing around with these extra scraps, long strips of paper, and he started folding them into triangles. And then you wrap the triangles around together, and he ended up making this hexagon. And when you fold this hexagon, it does some amazing things. Like it looks like it has two sides, but when you fold it, it sort of unfolds like a flower, and you find this third side. And I remember learning about this as a kid and making these things and being wowed by it. Like once I got into flexagons and then realized you can actually do like bigger flexagons that have even more hidden sides. It was like, whoa, amazing. You want more, right? It keeps you coming back for more. And of course, once I had that experience with that simple thing, I started devouring other Martin Gardner books because he often writes about math and puzzles and magic, which are all things that a little kid might find joy and surprise in as well. That's a good example of surprise, right? Like you see this thing that has this property that you just can't believe that it does. Where did that hidden side come from? How do I make
Yeah.
more creatures that are just as wonderful as this?
What a journey that started out, to feels like there's a connection between that and you winding up researching in topology.
Oh yeah, in combinatorial topology, right? Like
Yeah.
the folding and flexagons. Yeah, I actually hadn't even thought of that, but that certainly is an early experience to thinking about shapes and surfaces broken up into pieces.
So now, Francis, that was not something that you did in school, though. That was something you did outside of school. You learned about the
Yes.
flex. Yeah. So one of the things we're trying to do is get more of those sorts of experiences, joy into classrooms. And one of the things that's sort of guiding us is the CAST, Universal Design for Learning Guidelines. And one of those considerations is about nurture, joy, and play. And it states learning environments that spark joy and nurture opportunities for play are central to the learning process. In my research, I'll put links to all of those episodes in your book and things like that so people can check them out. And I would encourage them to do that. One of them you've already kind of brought up, these alternative assessments that you're giving, and that those are one of the ways that might support joy. Collaboration, I still use, Francis, you posted on Facebook a couple years ago, Harvey Mudd's paper on collaboration, and I still use it in my class. You've mentioned fun facts and enchanting examples as things that I think could bring joy. You talked about creating a museum of math, and that might be a way to bring joy into the classroom. And then you've talked about storytelling. I don't want to take up all of your time, but is there something that you'd like to kind of dig into now, especially as you're thinking about joy and that story? I think is a nice segue into what can we do in classes to help
Yeah.
foster joy in math or in other disciplines?
Yeah, I mean, I want to pick up maybe on two things that you said. Like one is the idea that we really need to rethink assessments because often what kids remember, maybe because they're so scary, are the assessments. And how do we make the assessments a place of joy? And so a thought related to that would be on every assignment, I think it's a good professional practice as a math teacher to have at least one problem that is a joyful problem, right? Like a source of a joyful problem might be a problem with a very interesting solution that when a student gets that solution, they're like, aha, this is a puzzle piece that fits. There are many books that one could turn to for sources of such problems. And certainly they could be some of these simple puzzle books. It's good to leaf through and find some interesting ones. You can make this joyful problem low stakes but high reward so that students, aren't stressing out about whether they're going to get the answer, but they'll have the experience of getting the answer, and that's a joyful thing. Changing assessments is a huge piece, I think, of changing people's perceptions around what's happening. I used to do for many years this open up every math class with a math fun fact, which is this just something short, simple, 5 minutes or less that can provoke a sense of wonder. As you mentioned, I have a website called Math Fun Facts where you can find 200 things that I use, but collect your own library of things that provoke wonder and joy. I've seen visited friends' classes, teachers, K through 12 teachers, where they start off every class doing a puzzle, like a Wordle or something. And that's just getting juices flowing, low stakes, different people can contribute and a solution, ideas. New York Times also has, no, sorry, it's LinkedIn has this puzzle that is called Patches, which is actually a very cool mathematical puzzle.
I haven't seen that.
You haven't seen it? Yeah, well, you should try it. This would be a wonderful way to start off a math class as well, is to solve the daily patches inside LinkedIn. And you'll see why it's this puzzle where you have to cover a whole square using rectangles or squares and of certain sizes, and they give you clues as to what size they are, but they don't tell you what shape, or they maybe give you a guide like it's a fat rectangle or tall rectangle or but a tall rectangle could be a 1 by 8 or it could be a 2 by 4, right? And so when you see the number 8, you don't really know exactly what shape it is, but it's deduction. I mean, these are low stakes way of increasing joy in the classroom and warming kids up to do the work of the day. And then I guess the other thing that I wanted to pick up on in terms of increasing joy is thinking carefully about how you scaffold these experiences, these aha moments. And so this might relate to the assessment question, but like often the kinds of problems I remember doing that as a kid that gave me joy were ones where there's some satisfaction in getting an answer because I was given some scaffolding to sort of help me do the steps necessary to get the aha moment. And so for a teacher, I guess that means thinking deeply about how you get people just to the edge of that aha without actually, but letting the student experience the aha for themselves. And I think that also points to what should happen inside the classroom in terms of how students interact with each other, like having a no spoilers rule. If there's an aha kind of problem or puzzle, it'll be, I think, very valuable to coach other students into helping their peers have experience that joy for themselves.
Yeah, that really resonates to me. Not sure how strongly this is connected, but I feel like it's at the edge of it. So in the play chapter of Math for Human Flourishing, you talk about math play builds confidence in struggle. It cultivates patience and the discipline of waiting for a solution. I mean, the spoiler thing is, it feels like when a teacher does that, especially, that it communicates somehow a lack of confidence that the students are going to get there themselves.
Mhm.
And
Yes.
that by not kind of doing that, part of what you can communicate is that your belief in them as problem solvers or as mathers or as math play,
Yes.
that this is something they can do.
Yeah, I think it's hard even for me sometimes to resist, solving the problem for a student themselves. But I mean, I think it's really important to communicate, to be transparent with students about the choices you're making and how valuable it is that they're wrestling, right? So it's not just the answer you're interested in, but always reinforcing the idea that like, hey, it's so great that you're thinking deeply about this. And that's what's going to enable them to be successful later in life when they encounter some difficult problem that they have the persistence to wrestle. Like I'm always, even with my 6-year-old, I'm always trying to praise him every time he puts forth effort, even if that effort doesn't result in a solution. Like it'll be like, I'm so glad you tried. That was really great. Similarly, every time he asks an interesting question, I'm always praising him for the question. Like, I'm so glad you're such a great question asker. And I love that. It's the kind of thing that I think it's easy to forget, especially when you're teaching at the higher levels, that it's important to reinforce the virtues, as I like to call them, right? The virtue of being a great question asker. That's a disposition. That's a habit. That's a mathematical virtue. That's a character quality, right? Being a great question asker, being willing to investigate, being deeply persistent, being able to have a disposition to look for beauty in unexpected places, right? These are virtues that you take with you the whole rest of your life, no matter whether you end up in a math profession or not. The more we can help our students see the virtues that they're building, not just the skills, not just the particular facts we want them to know, I think the better off our kids will be.
Yeah, that reminds me, there's a TEDx talk that I like to share with my students, you and Macintosh. It's about being a problem finder, not just a problem solver.
Oh,
And
yeah.
yeah, that we have spent a lot of time teaching people to be problem solvers, but the people that are going to move us forward in the coming generations are going to be the problem finders.
Yeah, and maybe one other thing to mention, since we're talking about the future, is just this idea of building virtues in our students as being a central part of what it means to do math means focusing on the process of doing math, not just the answers. And that in the age of AI is essential. Like it's urgent that our kids get this idea that math is actually about the thinking and the results, okay, like that these can be useful in an age though where your students where people are relying more and more on AI to give them answers that they haven't vetted themselves. Like one of the things that's going to be critical in the age of AI is to be able to look at an output and say, hey, is that reasonable? Does that make sense? And really understand what's going on is crucial. And we're not necessarily ready for a future like that if we don't talk about this with our students. Like this, one of the things you're getting out of this class is actually understanding for yourself, right? You don't want to trust your whole existence to machines that are going to think for you and do things for you. And not only that, you're going to miss the joy. You're going to miss the joy of seeing things and knowing things and understanding things for yourself.
And you're going to miss the joy of working with somebody else on that. One of the things that I found
Yeah.
interesting is the number of people who are using AI instead of working with somebody else. They're not feeling confident, they're not feeling safe, and so, oh, I
Yeah.
can ask Claude or I can ask Chat GPT or something, and that they're not going to be judgmental. And again, one of my favorite things from Ted Lasso is be curious, not judgmental. So one of the things I put on my syllabus is I do not want them using AI to replace collaboration.
Yeah.
And for me, and you talk about it at the very end of your article, this idea of there's the joy of sharing, that joy shared is doubled. And I'm a firm believer of that.
Yes, yes, I love that point. Yeah, I have also urged my students to not let AI be a replacement for in-person interactions. And I'm wrestling with that question of how do I structure the a classroom so that that's possible? Because part of the reason kids, as you pointed out, the reason kids are not, it's easy maybe to go to a chat bot, and one of the reasons that it involves risk when you go to another human being, but you never are going to learn that risk is valuable to take unless you do it. And so how do we help our students realize that risk is worth taking? That like, hey, I'm actually going to enjoy and getting to know somebody through this experience of working together on a hard problem.
I do random seating in my courses. It is universally despised by students through the majority of the course, but at the end of the course, almost always all of them are grateful for it. So
Yeah,
you have that awesome community story in the community chapter of Math Human Flourishing, with the math professor who is surprised by the laughter kind of at the end of a 30-minute problem that they solved together, and how she realized then that how much that had taken her away from everything that was
Mhm.
going on.
Yeah, it would be a shame if we didn't have experiences like that because we were talking to a chatbot.
All righty. So you are an exceptionally wise guest, so it would be foolish of us to not ask you what else, right? What have we not asked you about, or what would you want to share that we weren't able to bring up?
I don't have anything big that comes to mind other than just encouraging you all to find ways to think about joy in your own experiences and bring those into the classroom.
Now you have another book coming though, right?
There's been a rumor, I guess, that's spreading. Yes. Yeah, I actually do am working with a math teacher and an illustrator to bring a version of the Mathematics for Human Flourishing book to a younger audience. So this is going to be a graphic novel that tentatively is titled A Math Explorer's Guide to Human Flourishing. And I didn't know you were going to prompt me on this, so this is totally impromptu. But I do happen to have this little copy of
Oh,
cover of a this is just something that my collaborator passed out at a math conference, but I'm not sure if we're going to stick with this title, but currently it's called A Math Explorer's Guide to Human Flourishing. And you can see it's in collaboration with Kate Degner, who's a teacher, Christopher Jackson, who you might remember from the original story, from the original book, and Kane Lynch, who is a illustrator. So it's probably going to be out in the spring of 2027. It takes a while to do illustrations.
John and his son have also done a graphic novel, a
Oh, no
math-related
way.
graphic novel.
that'll be out pretty soon, probably a month or two.
Oh, excellent. Is that a math themed book?
It is called Al Logical, and it's a middle school student who discovers in her neighborhood a house that isn't always there. She winds up finding out that she really loves problem solving.
Oh, really? Oh, I'd love to see that book when it comes.
I'll send you along the preview PDF.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for having me on your show.
Thank you
Oh,
very
you're so
much.
generous with your time. We really
Yeah.
appreciate it.
Yeah, and this was great, a great way to kick it off. In closing, not only like to thank Francis, but also encourage our audience. If you have some examples of joy or want to contribute to our definition of joy, please email us at teaching like Ted Lasso, one long word, at gmail.com. And we'll get back to you and hopefully fill out our schedule for this season. So thanks again, Francis. This has been wonderful. So glad that we were able to connect.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Cheers.
Please check out our show notes for more resources.
I would like to see a tulip.
You mean tulip fields?
No, just one tulip. An entire field will be incredibly overwhelming.
Right again, Danny. The 1,500-piece jigsaw puzzle we were working on was called Tulip Gardens, and it was indeed overwhelming. That is, until we focused on just one tulip at a time. Maybe next time we look for a smaller puzzle of a single tulip.
Whistle! Whistle!